the riser, well, let's say we did a really shitty job of cutting away, and this riser goes. So the RSL is going to go with it. But we did a shitty job of cutting away, so this riser goes nowhere, right? As this comes up, there the RSL comes out. You can see there it is. It's got 3 things on it. Okay. The first one is the Collins lanyard, which goes right here. And so when that line pulls up, obviously I'm going to do them out of sequence, it's going to pull this cutaway cable, which will pull the other side cut away, to guarantee that if by some miracle you had just pulled partially, right? The second thing that's going to happen.
So what happens if you cut away the other one riser but in a different order?
Well, you really can't.
Can't do it. One is shorter than the other. Okay.
One is shorter than the other. Yes, one is shorter. You can't really do this. This is kind of to cover the scenario where you have a broken riser or something. Okay. Or maybe you got really clever and decided that you're going to trim your cutaway cables, which people have been known to do when you fuck it up. But,
What?
yeah, okay.
Because you know more than the manufacturer.
Right, because you know more than the manufacturer. The next part you can see is now the white. Okay, so this is gone. That's done. The white line comes, and hers is ripped off. That, of course, is going to pull your reserve, right? And so when you pull your reserve, hopefully, it pops out.
Nice catch, bro.
Okay. So, but assuming that it doesn't go very far, then now the little red lanyard takes over. And the little red lanyard is right here, and there's the SkyHook. So you can see how the red lanyard is now on the SkyHook, and it's going to pull everything out, and it's going to pull the whole reserve out.
So that's in case the reserve pilot doesn't fire or
well, it's not really in case, it's more of an assist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the reserve pilot chute is fired, but it's only this big, whereas the canopy is huge relative to that.
Right, right.
Okay,
Right.
so
Oh, I see.
You're
Okay.
really enjoying this.
right, so
Gotcha.
that's going to pull that on out, and it's going to be like a gigantor pilot chute.
Gotcha. Okay.
Now, let's backtrack for a second and ask the question that everybody asks, well, what if I have not deployed my main and therefore not cut away, and I had pulled instead, I had pulled my reserve handle, or my AED had fired to open it. What's the SkyHook going to do? Well, then what's going to happen is now, of course, there is no main out at all. The reserve pilot chute is actually going to perform its job, and now it's going to come up, and you can see how the hook is there, and when it gets tight, it's just going to slip off, and it's as if you had no SkyHook. It's a normal situation. Okay, so that's how all the SkyHook works. And then in either case, regardless of what you have, of course, you can say, oh, well, we can go one step further. We can ask how the AED works, because you probably can't see it, but it's right here. Here's the loop that's holding everything together, right? It looks pretty similar to your main closing loop. But right underneath there, I'm going to flip this up. There's where your AED cutter is. Okay? So,
I don't know how
this is a vigil cutter.
Okay.
Okay?
That loop goes through.
The loop is through that hole. You saw it was sticking up through here. Now, obviously, it's important that your rigger put it through the AED cutter. If your rigger had somehow, not put it through, then obviously it's not going to work. But that's, you presumably trust your rigger, hopefully. Okay.
What is this one for?
That is for the hesitator loop. Okay.
It's not on this
Well, this rig does not have a hesitator loop installed because the owner of the rig had a heart-to-heart with her rigger, and he said, "What the fuck do you want a hesitator loop for?" And she said, "Oh, okay."
Why? What?
Yes, sir.
I never heard about the hesitator loop before.
What instances would you want a hesitator loop?
None.
What is
What is a hesitator loop? Well, see, somebody had to ask the damn question. Okay.
Well, I remember you talking about it, and you
A hesitator loop is a little loop of it's a little piece of bungee cord that's threaded through here and down and tied into there. And when it's packed, your pilot chute, reserve pilot chute, is stuck into that bungee cord. Okay? And the purpose of that is so that when you've cut away and your reserve pilot chute comes out, it will hesitate for just a little bit of time to give your main canopy time to get away. Which, when you think about it, your canopy is going to go away instantly. We've spent $200 on a SkyHook to make sure that it doesn't go away. So it's pretty much a stupid fucking thing. But it was something that they made up back in the before time. And therefore, now the manufacturers still have to include it because somebody thought it was a good idea, and so it's now part of the system. So it now becomes an option that's up to the owner and the rigger together to resolve themselves of, but the manufacturers, of course, are not going to make a recommendation because then they had to take a position legally. So essentially, it's your responsibility in conjunction with your rigger. Now, probably there isn't anybody here who's ever even knows that a hesitator loop existed because their rigger just said, "You out of your fucking mind." I have a handful of them at home that we all like, save them as souvenirs. So that's what a hesitator loop is. Okay? So assuming we didn't have a hesitator loop and we didn't want to hesitate, and we're past the SkyHook part, obviously you can see that would have cut any way, case, or form. I mean, whether it's cut away and the RSL pulls the pin, whether you pulled the handle or whether the AAD pulled the handle, eventually all these flaps get open, and hopefully there's something, that or a main, which will pull it all out, and it all pulls out and pops out. And after that, it looks very much, I mean, this is done with the SkyHook. This is on to just how your reserve works. Okay, it looks very much like a normal canopy, right? I mean, you're probably all packed with risers, toggles, slinks. Okay. Key distinctions. I'm going to flip it over so you can see it. Now, this is the Aerodyne free bag. It's a little different than a. There you can see there's the lines all stowed. Okay. Aerodyne has these little bungee stows. All, to the best of my knowledge, all of the other manufacturers, this pouch is simply a pouch, and you just stuff the lines in there. Very similar to, yeah, look at the look. Yeah, yes, very similar to like a semi-stowless bag. You know how the semi-stowless bags, you've seen they lay them in there? They're actually just pouches, and what you do is you fold lines and you literally stuff them in there.
Now, is that responsible for reserve malfunctions?
No, not really.
Like,
I mean, it works pretty good.
Okay.
Either case works really good. This looks very pretty, but the others work fine. Okay. So anyway, you can see the lines would come out, right? Even if I hadn't opened the pouch, they would have come out through there, right? Okay. Okay. Now, what?
Remember I was asking you what happens if the free bag comes disattached and the canopy stays in there? What you said there was.
You're talking about bag strip,
yeah.
And that's the next step.
Okay.
Flip back over here, right side up. At one point long ago, I don't know, before my time, you have to ask Marty Jones when, because he told the story. Before we had something called these bungees right here are called safety stows, because there was some poor schmuck who had a free bag, and I guess the lines were all stowed in the pouch, but apparently I don't know how they closed it, whether it was with rubber bands that had rotted or whether there was some other closing mechanism. But the net effect of it was that these stows were not here, and so when it popped, the bag simply slipped off. Yeah. And the entire canopy was laying right here. And the bag went just like, you know how the magicians do on the tablecloth thing? Yeah, like that. Okay. So that's the reason why we have these bungee cords, which are called the safety stows. They're very much like your normal locking stows that you would normally see. So you can see if we pop it and we pop it, it's going to come out. Now it looks totally like a normal deployment. But imagine for a moment that somehow these had broken because they were old rubber bands that had rotted because they hadn't been repacked in 5 years or whatever. Because rubber bands do deteriorate over time. Okay, this safety stow is quite a bit spongy cord, holds up a long time. So then what you'd have this scenario where you have the whole thing is in there and the bag comes, see if I can do this. Boom, like that.
Yeah, like that.
Okay.
Magician Mark.
Yeah. And so all of this in the story was in there. Yeah, he won't do that. So then, of course, after that,
I was gonna ask you at what point, like, then what happened after that point? I know
he died. That guy died. There's a lot of people who've died.
Blah, blah, blah.
I mean, you can say thank you to a lot of people that maybe Laura even knows. I know a few.
Yeah, when the squares first came out, they were dangerous.
Yeah.
We pre-packed, we had line stows inside the container, and the lines would be stowed in here, and the canopy would be just lay on top of that pilot chute on top of the canopy. And sometimes they'd put a kicker plate there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. There's a lot of people who died to get you the gear you're wearing right now. Okay. So you can say
So
thank you
next
to
time
those
you see
people.
an old jumper, thank them.
Yes.
They've been the dummies before us.
They were the test
Well, and
dummies
we're the
before.
test dummies for the future.
That is
generation.
so
Thank you,
true. We're the
Gracie.
test dummy
Yeah.
for the future.
Right.
You're
So
welcome.
after that, it's pretty normal. I mean, what you've seen, it's going to be like there's your main, like a normal canopy, right? It comes out, the reserve comes out. And after that, slider, it's all pretty standard shit, right? No, it's a
Where's
little
the
pack, a little
laundry?
nicer.
Where's the
Grace,
laundry?
where's
Where's
your
the dirty socks?
There's